Chris Carter here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Today, I want to talk about something that former Steeler Ben Roethlisberger said, maybe don't hop on the hype train of the Steelers offense. Buy or sell on that notion. To do that, I have Nick Farabaugh coming on the show. It's going to be a fun episode of the Locked On Steelers podcast. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Steelers, your daily Pittsburgh Steelers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter, bringing you your daily dose of all things in the Pittsburgh Steelers. As always, you can find the show on your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. Like this video if you enjoy it. Subscribe to this YouTube channel to get all of your daily Monday through Friday episodes as well as our bonus content. We thank you for making us your first listen every day because we're your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. Download the app and use code LOCKEDONNFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5 only on Prize Picks, the best way to play daily fantasy sports. As I said before, we're joined by the man himself, Nick Farabaugh, Steelers beat reporter for Penn Live. He's been on the show several times. Get his show, Steelers Breakdown, wherever you get your podcast. Nick, it's glad to have you back on the show, brother. And man, do we have a topic here, because on another podcast, Ben Roethlisberger's podcast, the guy who led the Steelers offense for basically 2 decades, had wanted to give pause to Steelers fans who wanted to be excited about the Steelers offense for the second half of the season, saying that the Steelers maybe need to pause. Don't hop on the hype train just yet, because the Steelers offense still has to play high-end defenses in the second half of the season. But Nick, as you and I pointed out, they've played some high-end defenses in the first half of the season. And some of those those defenses in the second half of the season are not so high end.
Right. Denver's turned out to be a really good defense. The Chargers are a pretty good defense. The Jets and Giants, even though they are 2-6, both came in with very good defenses, respectfully ranked. So that was something the Steelers kind of showed a little bit. Now, I kind of understand where Ben's coming from, right? It is the Giants and the Jets.
Yeah, sure.
And more importantly, I think with the Giants and Jets, both teams were depleted in their secondary. They had injuries. Like the Jets didn't have DJ Reed. They didn't have Michael Carter II. Chuck Clark was out. They lost Ashton Davis and Tony Adams in the game, right? Like they lost 5 dudes that played. For the Giants, no Adoree Jackson, no Cordell Flott. Deonte Banks weirdly got benched in the middle of the game for whatever reason when he was probably playing as their best cornerback.
Richard Traina said that probably was going to happen because he has not been he's not sticking to his assignments, which I thought was very interesting.
Yeah, I mean, he saved a touchdown. I just was interested. I don't know. Regardless, I kind of understand where Ben's coming from, but also I know the teams are much better in the second half, but the defenses aren't exactly where you point to when you think of a lot of these teams. They face, in 8 of the 9 games, they face bottom 12 defenses in terms of success rate and EPA play. And obviously the one that isn't in there is the Kansas City Chiefs, who are going to be a big time test. I think the Eagles, are a good defense. I do, despite those metrics. And I also, Baltimore, I know they haven't been a good defense this year, and their pass defense has been just wretched. But they have a really good run defense. So I think you'll be able to find out like certain aspects of the offense throughout some of these games, right? Okay, you face the Ravens rush defense. If you can run on them, maybe you can talk about success building there. So I understand where he's coming from, but like there are not a ton of super elite defenses on their schedule outside of that Kansas City game and really that Eagles game. They're good defense overall. So, I mean, it to me, look at their first 4 games back from the bye. The Commanders, the Ravens, the Browns, and the Bengals. All 4 of those teams are bottom 12 defenses by both of those metrics. So there's going to be opportunities to be had. And so I think it's interesting that Ben brought that up. I agree from the short sample size. I don't think necessarily that you can expect the Steelers to average 31 points per game. I think that is, definitely a good thing to kind of put in. And also, we've only seen 2 games of Russ. Does he sustain this? Do we start to see some of the negatives pop up with Russ? Do whatever. Do the wide receiver position maybe pop up more in certain games? Does the struggles at offensive line with some of these injuries pop up more? There's different things that can definitely pop up throughout the game that we have seen pop up, right? We saw pop up against Dallas and Indy, and we just haven't seen them pop back up yet. So I understand it's a short sample size, so you don't want to completely declare, wow, the Steelers all of a sudden are a top 10 offense. But I also think it is okay to have a lot of optimism about what you've seen. The process by which they have done their work has been very sustainable. They've run the ball extremely well. They've hit big shots off play action, and it hasn't been through luck. It's been, especially against the Giants. Russ made a few beautiful throws in that game. That throw to Van, throw to GP. A lot of those throws were just great throws.
Hold on, Nick. You said that throw to Van was beautiful. I was told that was underthrown and not a good ball at all, and that he was lucky that Van Jefferson caught that pass.
No, it was a good 50-50 back shoulder ball. I thought the whole that was underthrown thing was pretty valid against the Jets. I thought, you saw Pickens make a few really plays where he stood on his head.
The one where it bounced off the dude's helmet, that was underthrown.
Right.
But the back shoulder thing where they go down the sideline, they stop turning, it's right there on their back hip. That is by design.
I agree. I thought, though, Russ took a notable step forward in this week. I thought, he looked more comfortable. He looked comfortable in the pocket. The arm looked fully back. He's stepping into his throws with his calf. It feels like he gained confidence in the calf. The rust is coming off for Russ, which is it looked good. And then I think you're starting to see notable improvements from some players. Mason McCormick's getting better as a rookie. That's notable. When Frazier gets back, he's going to continue his high-level play. He's been so good at center for them. Dan Moore has really been good at left tackle. We continue to see Calvin Austin just continue to improve over the season. He's gotten so much better. Najee Harris is on an absolute heater right now. There's just positives to come through. The Steelers are probably going to – there are going to be games in the second half where the Steelers offense is probably going to struggle, and the defense is going to have to stand up against really good offenses and peter those out. But I also think it is completely okay if you are a Steelers fan to be very optimistic about what you've seen from this group.
So I'm gonna play a game here. Instead of doing buy or sell, let's play it this way. Right now, the Steelers are 15th in the NFL with 23.4 points per game. And yes, there's a special teams touchdown there as well. But bear with me. I am still a subscriber to the old stats of did you score or did you not score? DVOA, DVEA. Give me the points. That's where Mike. Whenever I ask Mike Tomlin about DVOA or yards or this or that, he's like stats are for losers. So I'm not gonna go that far. I'm gonna just simply say points scored. Right now, they're at 23.4 points through 8 games. Over under at the end of the season, they average 25 points or more.
I'm gonna go under on that.
Okay.
I kind of think they're gonna hover right around where they are.
Okay.
Like the 15th best offense for this team sounds completely about right. It really does. And we'll see, wide receiver addition maybe pending and whatever happens, but it does sound about right to me that they would be, with all the moving pieces, they're still kind of coalescing together about the 15th, somewhere that 12 to 17 range. That sounds about right. I don't think they're a top 10 offense. I'll say that.
Exactly. I agree with that entirely. And at 25 points, that would put them right now at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That would put them 9th. So that is a little higher than I was thinking there. I was just naming a number there at saying 25. But to me, Nick, when I'm looking at the Steelers offense, still being 15th is like a relief for this offense from where it's been the past several years. Like just looking at how bad the offense has been. And this is all, and you and I have talked about this all offseason. If the defense is elite, and look, they're not completely elite and they're shutting everything down, but they're the second best scoring defense in the NFL right now. If they can continue to improve while staying up in those ranks as far as scoring all year, and the offense can stay right in the middle of the NFL, that's a way to be a competitive football team, not just throughout the regular season, but to get to the postseason in a good place and maybe even host a playoff game at some point.
Yeah, that's a winning formula. That's the type of stuff that they've needed. And I think the difference with hopefully the difference with this offense, if they can sustain it, is if they end up going to let's say they go to Buffalo and they go down 10-0 in the first quarter, you're not all of a sudden going to be like, well, the game's over, right? Like they can come back because that theoretically that defense, can clamp down. And if the offense can have that firepower to keep up in some of these high scoring affairs. I think that's going to be the real game changer for the Steelers. I mean, even looking at, the Jets game, for example, when they got down early and got punched in the mouth and then just routed them the rest of the way. If the Jets hadn't been keeping that up and said they had went tit for tat and score for score, Steelers offense would have been able to match them. I think that's something that's different this year. The Steelers have been down twice. I think they have been down by a touchdown or more this year and have come back and won those games. So they have overcome deficits in this game and a few of these games. And I feel like, that's something that we're really going to figure out in the second half. That's going to be one of the big things. If they get down, let's say Baltimore gets up 10-0 early. Let's see what happens. I'm interested to see playing from behind where they're at.
Certainly. I want to talk to you about the defense too, because they're also an issue. Even though they've had success, there's some worries here and there about where they are. And they said that they're not satisfied when we talk to people in the locker room on Wednesday. We'll talk about that next year on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Chris Carter, Nick Farabaugh, stick with us. We'll be right back. But first, we'll remind everyone that this show is also sponsored by 5 Hour Energy. Our friends over at 5 Hour Energy know that being a passionate football fan isn't just a hobby, it's a way of life. It takes a lot of energy to power through all-day tailgates, touchdown celebrations, or an agonizing second overtime, which is why they've created the Stand the Fan 5 Hour Energy Shot with a special flavor called Fan Fuel, the energy shot made for super fans just like you. The fans who are first in the parking lot and who are last to leave, we see you. You know what else gives you a bit of fuel during the sports week? A Steelers fans at Acrisure Stadium doing a Renegade. I saw another Renegade. Nick, you did too on Monday night. And let me tell you, when those towels are twirling and everyone's singing the song and everyone comes out chanting defense, it sets the stadium ablaze. If you're there, you can't help but feel the energy. We feel it in the press box as the press box is shaking. That's the kind of energy that 5 Hour Energy can give you. No matter what team you root for, being a fan requires a heart, soul, and a whole lot of energy. Whether you're prepping for a big tailgate or ironing your jersey, your game day to-do list is always a mile long. That's why the limited edition Stand the Fan 5 Hour Energy Shot is here to help you keep you fueled throughout the season. That's Stand the Fan, a 5 Hour Energy Shot by 5 Hour Energy, available at 5hourenergy.com, shipped nationwide. We're back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter, here with Nick Farabaugh, PennLive.com. Nick, let's get to the defense here. Look, again, I know that there's DVOA and there's success rates and there's things like that, but at the end of the day, the Steelers defense right now has the number 2 scoring defense in the NFL. They're giving up 14.9 points per game, a great rate to be at right now, and they have been good this year. Can they be better? Absolutely. And that's what I want to talk to you about right now, because in this win against the Giants, sure, they only give up 18 points, but it was a little concerning. They let a running back go for 145 on him, and including a 45-yard touchdown. It took a big chunk on him there. And it was concerning that they didn't shut down Daniel Jones and make him look like he was Kyle McCord for Syracuse playing the Pitt Panthers when he threw 5 interceptions and 3 pick sixes on Thursday Night Football in that stadium just a few days before the game. So I ask you this. Of what you've studied, you're a film guru. You grind tape, you study, you write about it on Penn Live. What is more concerning for you at this point of the season? Is it the Steelers' pass defense or is it run defense? Or can you just say it's equally concerning?
This isn't close for me. It's the pass defense.
Okay.
I think their run defense is 100% legit. I think they had an off night. I 100% think Tyrone Tracy is very underrated as a running back too. I really like his game. And listen, I think that the Giants popped off 3 big runs on them that were uncharacteristic of the Steelers. On the 45-yard touchdown run, Deshaun Elliott took a very uncharacteristically terrible angle. That's like the first time we have seen Deshaun Elliott take a bad angle all season.
Right.
He had, I think, another 20-yard run where he just popped off, where, there were like 5 guys that had him wrapped up and he just squirmed out of it. And you were like, what in the world? Like, that doesn't happen in the run defense game. I know the Steelers have had some, issues in the open field tackling at times, but they don't really do that very often. So I think, they've shut down Jonathan Taylor, Bijan Robinson. They've shut down some pretty good backs. Breece Hall, did some things on dump offs against them in the first half, but did not run the ball very well against them. They've shut down some good running backs. So I'm not super concerned about that run defense. Now, obviously, you're going to be concerned when you face like Derrick Henry and Lamar because that's probably the best run offense in football right now.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm not like super concerned about it being replicable by like every single team. I think the pass defense though is concerning, and the reason I say that is I think they're kind of a little too predictable right now. I think that's something that they can look at. And specifically, I think Teryl Austin and Mike Tomlin can look at and try and mix things up. They're 29th in blitz rate. I think they can blitz more. We talked about this in training camp, Chris, where I said, think of the blitzes you can use with Nick Herbig, with Patrick Queen, with E-Rod, and with Peyton Wilson. All four of those guys are great blitzers from off-ball alignments. And with Herbig back, you can bring back that 3 outside linebacker set. All the 3 of those outside linebackers have not been healthy since the second quarter of week 3.
Very true.
That is significant. They are missing that piece. So I would like to see them kind of mix up their blitzes a little bit. I'd like to see them disguise things a little more. They kind of have 2 disguises. Like, I feel like it's predictable how they switch from single high to 2 high sometimes. Because we've seen a lot of teams hit those cover 2 hole shots on them.
Yeah.
Daniel Jones almost did hit it on them, but Minka made a great play and just walloped Darius Slayton. But yeah, I feel like, they play a lot of cover 3 and cover 1, and that's going to be who they are. But I would like to see a little bit more disguising back there, because I think right now they're a really good defense. I think if they can start to tap into blitzes a little more, just mix up, keep a little bit, because I think a lot of OCs right now kind of know where the bones are buried in the schematic part of this. And so like when you face, the Colts, for example, you can get it out in 2.4 seconds because you can draw up attack, cover 3 pretty easily. And so I think if you can mix in that schematics a little bit, I think this team can go from what is a really good defense to what they should be, in my opinion, which is perhaps the best defense in football, because I think they absolutely 100% have the talent to be the best defense in football. I don't think there's a talent issue on this defense. I really don't. I think they have gotten extremely good play out of pretty much everybody, to be quite honest with you, on the defense. If you had concerns about Queen and Wilson early, they've definitely evened out over the last 4 weeks. Joey Porter Jr., Dante Jackson, Deshaun Elliott, and Minka, have had their beanie to have had ups and downs, but I think they're becoming pretty steady. And so I feel like this defense is really good, and they're creating a ton of turnovers, and they're creating a ton of havoc up front. But I like where it's going, and the reason I'm saying there's positive signs is because they started to move TJ and Alex around. I like that. I think that is huge for them to start. Teams just can't ship TJ on the left side anymore, Chris. I think that's important. Getting him free rushes or getting Highsmith free rushes, Herbig, singling up Cam, anything you can do there. I think that's going to be a huge thing, because the more the Steelers can get quick pressures, the more deadly they're going to be defensively. It's just going to be something they can do. And if they can get quick pressures and they're still running that quick game, you're going to open them up to more interceptions. You're going to open them up to more splash plays. So I think the Steelers are on the precipice of getting there. I think there's more meat left on that bone, though.
I agree that there's definitely more meat left on the bone. One thing about your point about maybe disguising things a little bit better, there were several times where Daniel Jones would hit just underneath of Joey Porter Jr., and you would see Joey Porter Jr., like when you watched L20, just throw his hands up, like, come on. And sometimes I think that there was a little bit of frustration that there wasn't some underneath help with him, because he was definitely, responsible for over-the-top coverage. But I think sometimes he was like, there was one time he looked to the sideline like, come on. And I think that there's sometimes he was like, I want you to let me go after that play. I want you to maybe let me line up in man coverage and just run with that guy. And maybe when they're doing zone, it's in situations where it's kind of, you can see it coming a little bit. Now, again, Teryl Austin, Mike Tomlin, their defensive game plan, for as much as we can say like, hey, there's things they could be smarter at, that game plan is also part of why they are the number 2 scoring defense in the NFL right now. And yes, their talent is phenomenal. You see TJ Watt and Alex Highsmith wreck a game like they did late in the game in that second half against the Giants. That's a big reason why they win. But hey, that's why most the Chiefs aren't their defense without Chris Jones in the middle wrecking shop. The Rams don't win a Super Bowl if Aaron Donald isn't a complete monster in the middle of the field. The steel curtain defense of the 70s ain't what they are without Mel Blount, Mean Joe Green. You can go defense all over time. There's no defense that was just great and elite with nobody. Like that just isn't something that happens. So I think that there's always the talent factor, but I agree with you. There are ways that I think that, especially with the talent they have and the experience they have in this defense. You talk about Patrick Queen, you talk about Minkah Fitzpatrick, Deshaun Elliott, Dante Jackson, TJ Watt, Alex Highsmith, Cam Hayward. These are guys who have been in the NFL for several years now. And guys like Joey Porter Jr., who I think are very smart players as well, some of their younger guys. Maybe Beanie Bishop isn't a guy that's like this yet. Maybe he's getting there, though. He's certainly playing pretty well with 3 interceptions in 2 games now. But I think what should be an asset for these guys is their ability to call some of these adjustments and understand, not just know how to make those adjustments and know how to disguise things, but how to play well in those situations. For example, on the 3rd and 16 they gave up, it was just a deep curl. It wasn't a fancy route that the Giants ran to get that open. Joey Porter Jr. was just kind of playing the sticks, and he was just late attacking the route, and it was a deep curl. And then the ball it takes the ball a good minute to travel 16 yards down the field, and he was late breaking in on it. And I think it's like, hey, in those moments right there, they need to be sharper. And if they're sharper in those moments, that's when more opportunities will come for Minkah Fitzpatrick to be a turnover creator for the Steelers. Teams are avoiding him because they can't avoid him. And again, this is not to say the Steelers defense is bad, because I think it's, like you said, it's a really good defense right now. It's going to win you most games. I think it's also a testament to the Steelers offense that they were able to win that game when the defense wasn't playing its best. But great defenses find their way to play their best more often than not in the season. And it's those things that, like you, I agree, if they can tune these things up, just get a little sharper, get the chemistry flowing in the right ways. And some of that will require play calling and integrating play calling with what the defense, what these players are skilled at. They do those things. This can be the number 1 defense, and not just points allowed, not just DVOA, but like legitimately an unquestioned factor. Like, hey, that's the defense that nobody wants to mess with this year.
Right. And you said the man stuff, with Joey. I mean, I think that fits into the blitzing ideas, right? I think they do need to heat up quarterbacks a little more. I think that's part of it. I don't think blitzing a ton is necessarily, indicative of a great defense right now. Right. We see a lot of great defenses doing it, Flores in Minnesota, Spagnuolo in Kansas City, but you don't need to be an elite blitzing defense to be a great defense. I just think it's something to throw a curveball, and I think you have the guys to play man behind it. I think I saw a stat that it's a little crazy. I don't expect the Steelers to run a ton of cover 0, really ever, Chris, but they are the only team this year through 8 weeks that have not run a single snap of cover 0. I just think that's just an interesting stat when you talk about this blitzing stuff. And so I think they can do a lot of different things. I think, getting unblocked pressures like that, Chris, is kind of one thing that they can really do when you're talking about the sharper kind of play that they can do to help out guys on the back end or help out Minkah get those splash plays. If they can get some more unblocked pressures up the middle from guys like Queen and Roberts and Wilson or Herbig coming off the bench or, whatever it is, right? Elliott coming. I just think that's one thing that they can delve into. I think when we say there's meat left on the bone, there's meat left on the bone, some of these details that we're talking about, but I also think schematically they have some things that they can maybe throw at teams that they haven't completely shown yet. I do wonder if it's intentional. I kind of wonder if Teryl Austin has
let me get my tinfoil hat or some stuff here.
Well, man, TA and Mike T aren't dumb. They know what the second half of the schedule looks like, and I kind of wonder if they've been hiding a little bit of their blitz packages so far this year, and are going to unleash it a little bit more, because the experimentation against the Giants was really interesting, moving TJ and Alex around. Right. We saw some double A gap mug looks that necessarily didn't come, but we saw some looks. And I did have one player tell me that, they thought the blitz heavy stuff was going to come a little bit more. It didn't obviously end up coming, but that the blitzes are coming. So my tinfoil cap is on. I'm interested to see. I think the Steelers might have it kind of intentionally left out a little bit of schematic versatility.
Maybe not putting enough spice on the chicken just so they can hit you with it later. I see what you say in there, sir. And also to your point about that flipping around, I know I told fans this would be out yesterday. It's actually out today. I did a film study on the impact of switching those Highsmith and TJ Watt out. It only happened for 4 plays, But it wasn't just about when they did it. It was about what it impacted the Giants overall. Carl Dunbar, Steelers defensive line coach, talked about yesterday in the locker room saying, hey, we did it one play, and then on TJ's sack strip fumble, that was in the fourth quarter, that was a red zone stop and a huge play, one of the biggest plays of the game. They left him one-on-one, and we think it was because they were too busy worrying about where people were and forgot to check. And that's what moving him and Highsmith around forced offenses to be more accountable for, and can lead to getting more of those one-on-ones. I agree with you. There's stuff that they're probably saving that maybe we see after the bye, or maybe even get sharpened a little bit after the bye. I want to focus more on the offensive line with Nick in a bit, because Broderick Jones is a major talking point. Some people even calling him a bust in his second year. I want to talk about the film on Broderick and the status of the offensive line. We'll do that next here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Chris Carter, Nick Farabaugh, stick with us. We'll be right back. But first, remind you, this show is also brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, the #1 sportsbook in America. You've heard us talk about FanDuel all year long because they are America's #1 sportsbook. Well, with the Steelers on the bye, it's time to go over all the action in the AFC North and the odds, ends, and lines there. The Ravens are 9.5-point home favorites over the Broncos, despite them having the same record. That's an interesting number to look into that bet. The Bengals are 7.5-point home favorites over the Raiders, while the Browns are 1.5-point home dogs to the Chargers. All those odds, ends, and lines can be got to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, the #1 sportsbook in America. You can get going this season with a big return on FanDuel today. If you want to take advantage of FanDuel right now with your first bet on FanDuel, you can place a $5 bet and you'll get started with $150 back in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com to get started. Remember, if you're a new customer and you place at least a $5 bet down and you hit on it, you will get $150 back in bonus bets only on FanDuel.com. Download the FanDuel app today or go to FanDuel.com to get started with America's #1 sportsbook. This show is also brought to you by Built Rewards. Listen up, renters. Ever feel like you're stuck in this loop with rent payments, just watching your money vanish into thin air? It's time to turn that rent game around and start earning some serious rewards. That's where Built Rewards comes in. Built is breaking ground as a neighborhood rewards program that hooks you up with points on your rent. Every month, pay your rent and watch the Built points roll in. Use points to jet off on a dream vacation. Put your points towards a flight or a hotel stay with over 500 airlines and 700,000 hotels and properties. You can also use your points to book fitness studio classes, redeem them towards a future rent payment. They're designed to meet your lifestyle. Pay rent hassle-free through the Built Rewards app. Your rent game just got a major upgrade. Built points have been consistently ranked the highest value point currency by the Points Guy and Bankrate. Earn points by paying rent right now when you go to join built.com/LockedOnNFL. That's join, JOINBILT.com/LockedOnNFL. Make sure to use our URL so that they know we sent you. That's JOINBILT.com/LockedOnNFL to start earning points with your rent payments today. Back here in the Locked On Steelers podcast, Chris Carter here with Nick Farabaugh from PennLive.com. Nick, let's talk about this offensive line. And before we talk about the whole line, I want to talk about Broderick Jones, because anyone with eyes can see Broderick Jones has not had a good start to the year. He's giving up pressures. He's been not being consistent in the run game. I think he's had some good plays. I think that I'm always that person that I don't ever think it's too high or too low when you're talking, or I don't ever get too high or too low when talking about players. I think there's always potential to be had. I think there's always improvements to be made. And with Broderick Jones, as Alan Saunders and I did when I did my grades, people wanted him to give a bus ticket grade, which is like our absolute worst grade that we ever give a player. It means like basically they need to be sent out of Pittsburgh. I gave him only a 2 skull grade, not even a 3 skull grade, which is the worst before the bus ticket there, because I also saw plays where like, hey, he wasn't as much of a detriment, but there are consistent problems in Broderick Jones's games. I think that things that you saw last year that he was doing well, he's not doing as well this year. Nick, as a film guru, as a guy that studies this stuff, what are the things that you're most surprised that he is not doing well this season?
He blocks unlike any offensive tackle I've ever watched. Sometimes he just doesn't use his hands. I mean,
it's so weird, right?
Right. Yeah. He like shoulder blocks them. I mean, I wonder if, I mean, I know the right arm was a thing, right? The elbow and the wrist. I don't know if that's still an issue. But on film, I mean, it's just, even though he's super athletic, super big and strong, it's just really hard to win when you're not using your hands. And when he does use his hands, I think that's his biggest issue right now. I think it's his hand usage. They're getting wide. The time's too late. So he's opening up his chest and guys are getting inside of him and pushing him back and forklifting him. I thought that was a big issue in pass pro throughout the year. I think it continues to be a big issue. I thought it was a big issue last year. It's gotten worse this year. I've never seen an offensive lineman not use his hands. I don't know. I don't know what to say about that. But then when he puts it together, I could see him moving guys down the line. In the run game, it's a roller coaster too, because sometimes he will block the wrong guy way off more often than anyone else on the offensive line. It is when you see like a free runner coming to hit one of the running backs and you're wondering where did that guy come from? Somehow on film, you always see Broderick looking back and being like, oh man. It's happened
even in plays where Najee Harris is 10 yards downfield, I'm like, well, what did Broderick Jones do? And there's sometimes he just misses guys. And I'm just like, how did that happen?
It's weird. So yeah, I mean, I think Pat Meyer put it perfectly when he said focus on each and every play, but more importantly than just focus, it's like not only do you focus on each and every play, but you focus on every single aspect that you have to worry about. And I think that's really important, but it has been tough to watch Broderick. Unfortunately, he has just struggled. It doesn't really matter who they put in front of him. He's been at least 50% bad in every game, as much as he's been good. And a lot of these games, Chris, unfortunately, it has skewed more into the bad territory than good in a lot of these games. And so it's concerning. And there's no doubt about it. He's still, hasn't played a full NFL season. He's still 23 years old. He's still very young. And they kind of got to get the game to slow down. It seems like the game sometimes is moving too fast for him.
I agree with that.
And so I think it is very fair for any fan that has watched Broderick Jones on tape to be concerned about him.
Now,
here's concerning.
Here's my thing, Nick. I agree. Concerned, certainly. Like he hasn't been that, but I think that where I pump the brakes is saying like, oh, this guy's a bust. He's never going to be anything. Just draft another tackle in the first round next year. I think that's a little early. This guy has a lot of positive traits that could be worked on. Just look at Dan Moore, and Alan Saunders made this joke yesterday on the show. Look at Dan Moore, and when he got hurt, Steelers fans were like, oh, you can't lose Dan Moore. And like that was a legitimate feeling because then like I think the first play he came out when he was injured just very slightly, that his replacement gave up a sack. And Dan Moore still is not some premier offensive tackle that you want long term. If you're the Steelers, you're hoping that Troy Fautano and Broderick Jones can live up to it. But to me, Nick, the things I see in Broderick Jones, they're very fixable. If he's able to use his hands, and I think I saw that man use his hands last year. I saw him just get up on guys and move them out the way and do so. And yes, it was inconsistent, but I was like, hey, he was a rookie and he was a raw rookie. You and I talked about that when he was drafted. Like, look, he's gonna have a really roller coaster start because often young linemen, period, offense or defense, have rocky starts in the NFL. Go look at how long it took Cam Hayward to become Mr. Cam Hayward, the way that he done and to become a dominant force in the NFL. It took him years. And I think I'm not saying it's going to take Broderick Jones, 7 years to figure it out. But I am saying that I think that there should be some patience with what he's going through. I think that, you want to give him the chance to learn and fight through it. I do think that I do think that his problems are fixable and not things that the Steelers should just throw away and like, well, got to throw the baby out with the bathwater here.
Yeah, I don't think they should throw him away, but I also think I think they need to start seeing a few more glimmers. That's what I'm going to say. So I'm not panicking, but I think you need to start to see because, like we always say, progress is not linear. It's not always up, right? You sometimes have that dip. I think they need to start seeing some upward movement. I think that's something because I don't think we've seen enough of it, Chris, and I think that's what's concerning. I think the fact that it maybe went right, like it went okay and then down, and then it's kind of just flatlined it down, I think is a little concerning. I think that's where it is. And so, I completely agree. Patience. We knew this guy was a project coming into this. We knew that, we've talked about how I think not giving him one spot where he was just focusing on technique, I think wasn't the best idea. Now, though, he is at one spot. He's just playing right tackle. They should be able to kind of focus on technique. And I think his hands are the A1, the number one thing that they need to get going. And maybe this bye week, can be something, when we're talking about fighting through injuries and stuff, maybe this bye week where he can rest, if I haven't really kind of asked anybody if the wrist or elbow is still an issue, but he's still got that brace on his wrist. Maybe this is a week where he can, rest, get fully back, and maybe we start to see him attack more with his hands out of the bye. I think that's the biggest thing we need to see, because I think if we start to see that, we'll start to see more of the good pop through. But they need to see, I think, a few more glimmers soon enough.
I agree entirely there. But let's move on to the rest of the O-line. This O-line, on top of Broderick Jones, has dealt with injuries galore. Troy Fautanu has barely played this year, and he was the first-round tackle that was going to take Broderick Jones' job at one point. James Daniels is out for the season. Zach Frazier has had to miss a few games now with injuries, though they're expecting to get Zach back soon, I believe, after the bye week here. What is your general impressions of the state of this offensive line, and if it can make a sort of rise, the kind of rise that it has the last few seasons? I mean, you go back last year, they went from being not great in the first half to pretty decent in the second half. And I think if Zach Frazier's healthy, and if Mason McCormick keeps making steps forward, Isaac Seumalo, I thought, played his best game of the season on Monday night. I think there's a potential for this offensive line to be the best version of a Steelers offensive line since maybe even like 2018 Pouncey and DeCastro.
There's a chance. I think, Dan Moore has continued to play really well. It looks like his leap is real this year. He has played legitimately well. He's going to get himself a nice bag this offseason, whether it's from Pittsburgh or someone else. But he has proven he is a legit starting left tackle in this league. So that's been really good. He's been awesome in both. Seumalo, I think, after missing those first 4 games, has really knocked the rust off the past 2 games. I think he's hit his stride. He's looking like the Isaac Seumalo of old. Zach Frazier, I knew Zach Frazier was going to be good, Chris. He has been incredible. He has probably been, honestly, he's been easily a top 10 center in the league since him playing. Him coming back will be huge for them. Although, I will say, Ryan McCollum, pretty good in the run game.
Nick,
he struggled a little bit in pass pro against Quinnen and Dexter, but the run game, he was moving dudes, reaching them in the second level. I was like, okay, Ryan McCollum showing some things. I think McCormick has been really fun to watch. He's just like, I think he is the upside play of this line. He has played way better than a 4th round rookie should. Throwing to a really tough circumstance, Chris. He has looked awesome. And then as we went back to Broderick Jones, I think Broderick is going to be kind of the deciding piece of where the ceiling goes with this group. But I think you can expect right guard to left tackle to be really solid and coalesce together. Let's see what happens at right. Whether that's Broderick taking a step up. They're going to get more tackle depth back. They just activated Dylan Cook, so they have more tackle depth now, which is nice because they had been playing essentially with 3 tackles. Spencer Anderson's kind of the swing guy there, but they've been playing with 3 tackles, and you saw the 1 rep of Calvin Anderson that you saw against the Giants. So Dylan Cook coming back is nice. I think he's got some upside too. I think this O-line can come together and play really well. I like the performance of a lot of them, and let's see what happens with Broderick. I think that's going to be the key.
What's more likely? Dylan Cook is primarily just the sixth offensive lineman, or Dylan Cook replaces Broderick Jones at some point this season?
Man, I don't think I haven't gotten the vibe that they're close to benching Broderick.
Same here. I've seen that floated, and that's why I wanted to ask you.
I wouldn't, if he keeps playing like this for like another.
It's not out of the realm of possibility. I agree.
Right. If he keeps playing like this for 3 or 4 more weeks, I think it is going to become a realistic possibility. And the reason I say 3 or 4 weeks is because 1, Cook has missed like 10 weeks for 1 with a foot injury. And then 2, I just also think you're not giving up on a guy you knew was raw, was your 1st round pick last year. You traded up for him. Clearly you have a lot of things in the cards for him. And so, I think, if in a month's time, if we come out of Cleveland or Cincinnati and Broderick has not improved 1 iota and he's just killing them at certain points, I think then you can start talking about, I think you can use logic and say, okay, maybe they go to Dylan Cook here. And Dylan Cook's a complete question mark. We don't know what Dylan Cook is. We don't. We don't know what he is. So that's another thing, right? But I also think maybe when you start getting later into the season, Chris, where's Troy Fautanu at? Is he able to return, late in the season, early playoffs? I think that's going to be another thing to watch too. But yeah, I mean, I think Broderick is going to ride this out for the most part, but if he's struggling amongst time, I think it's going to intensify. We'll see.
Absolutely. The Steelers offensive line, a big topic. We'll have a lot more to break down as we head through into the bye weekend here. We got another episode tomorrow with Jenna Harner. She'll be still joining with us. We'll preview the NFL slate, but we'll also get some more Steelers talk coming at you here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Nick, thank you so much for joining us here, as always, on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Let people can find you, follow you, and get more of your work.
Yeah, you can follow me on X at Farabaugh FB, as you can see. Make sure to check out the stuff at PennLive.com. We got great stuff coming. And make sure to subscribe to this Penn Live YouTube channel, Steelers Blitz. Steelers Breakdown comes out every day, so you don't want to miss it. Little 10-minute episodes. We talk about what you guys want. We'll hit it.
Absolutely. He's Nick Farabaugh. Check him out at PennLive.com. Nick, thanks for joining us. Thank you all for joining us here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Carter Critiques. Read my work at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, post-gazette.com. Find me here on the Locked On Steelers podcast every day, Monday through Friday, breaking down your Pittsburgh Steelers right here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Back tomorrow with Jenna Harner. See you here on the Locked On Steelers podcast.